The Sorith delegate was already standing when I walked in. That was wrong. Council sessions do not start until the Grandmaster strikes the resonance plate. Delegates do not stand before that. 23 species, 300 years of protocol, and nobody stands early. Nobody except the Sorith. I took my seat in the observer gallery, 1 chair, 1 desk, no vote, and looked at the delegate standing alone in the middle of that vast chamber floor. Young, by Sorith reckoning. Pale-ridged. The kind of stillness that comes not from calm but from someone who has already done the hardest thing and is now just waiting for it to be over. I have seen that before. Different face. Different species. Same posture. I opened my notepad. The Grandmaster struck the plate. The session began. I have been Earth's observer to the Galactic Council for 3 years. Before that, I spent 22 years in the UN Joint Defense Liaison Corps, which is a polite way of saying I spent 2 decades in rooms where everyone already knew what they were going to do and needed a human present to make it look collaborative. I am good at rooms. I know how they breathe. I know the difference between a pause that means consideration and a pause that means the decision was made before anyone sat down. This room breathes differently than most. The Grand Chamber sits inside a moon, the Orith 9, hollowed out 400 years ago specifically for council sessions. The ceiling is 40 meters high. The acoustics are engineered so that every species, regardless of hearing range, receives speech at the same relative volume. The floor is pale stone from a planet that no longer exists. The whole thing says, "We have been doing this longer than you have been doing anything." I stopped being impressed by it somewhere around month 6. The Grandmaster, a Velmara, old enough that his bioluminescence has started to fade at the edges, called the session to order and read through the standard opening business. Trade disputes. Resource classification updates. A joint motion on deep space corridor rights that had been tabled 11 times and was apparently going to be tabled a 12th. I wrote none of it down. Then the Grandmaster said, "The Sorith delegation has submitted a request for formal floor time under Article 9. Article 9. I wrote that down. Article 9 is a voluntary confession of hostile act. It exists because the Council, in its considerable wisdom, decided centuries ago that species who come forward and admit to violations should receive some measure of leniency compared to those who get caught. It is used rarely. The last time I had seen it in the session logs was 47 years ago, when the Thren Collective confessed to an unauthorized terraforming attempt in a contested zone. The Sorith delegate did not sit down when the Grandmaster called his name. He was already standing. "The Sorith Confederation formally acknowledges," he said, and his translator rendered it in that flat, careful tone that formal confessions always take, that 12 years ago, in the month your calendar designates as March, we conducted a Tier 2 exploratory incursion against an unregistered, uncontacted species in Sector 7, marginal classification. He paused. That species is now registered. They are present in this chamber. 23 species turned, in varying degrees of subtlety, to look at the observer gallery. At me. I looked back. One by one, they looked away. I am 52 years old. I have a scar that runs from my left knee to my hip that I got not in combat but in the field hospital afterward, when the power cut out and someone knocked over a surgical tray in the dark. I have a daughter who was 8 years old when the Sorith ships came. I have 17 titanium anchors in my left femur. I have a notepad and a pen and a cup of cold coffee I carried in from the shuttle bay and forgot to drink. I picked up the coffee. It was bad. It is always bad on the shuttle. I drank it. The Sorith delegate continued reading. He said they had sent 8 assessment vessels. He said the incursion was never intended as a full invasion, it was standard pre-contact evaluation protocol, used for every uncontacted species in the marginal sectors. He said the vessels were cloaked, armed with perimeter defense only, and equipped to observe without being observed. He said they lost all 8. In 11 days. He read the fleet casualty figures. He did not read Earth's. The chamber was very quiet. Not the quiet of shock, the quiet of a room full of people trying to recalibrate. I know that quiet too. I was looking at my notepad. I had drawn a small rectangle while he was talking. Neat sides. I filled it in, corner to corner, slow and methodical. The Sorith Confederation offers full reparative acknowledgement, the delegate finished, and requests the Council's formal recording of this confession as per Article 9. He sat down. I capped my pen. The Grand Master asked if there were initial responses from the floor. There were 14, from 14 different species, all of them beginning with some variation of procedural sympathy for the confession and then pivoting, carefully and efficiently, to confusion about the numbers. 8 vessels. Pre-FTL species. The math, as several delegates noted, was irregular. I listened to all 14. I refilled the pen cap. Uncapped it. Refilled it. A Velmara junior delegate leaned toward a colleague 2 seats down and said, in a register she clearly thought was below my hearing, "Why do they always send the damaged ones as representatives?" My translator earpiece caught it cleanly. I wrote it down. Then I wrote underneath it, in very small letters, because the damaged ones know what was lost. I did not look up. I did not need to. The session was going to be long, and I had a fresh page, and the Sorith delegate was sitting with that particular stillness of a person who has done the hard thing and is now waiting to see what it costs. I recognized it. I had sat like that once. Different chair. Different room. The session continued. The Council's formal response period lasted 3 hours. I know because I watched the chamber's timekeeping display, a gentle amber arc on the far wall that moved like a slow tide, and I counted the full rotation twice before the Grand Master called for a structured debate on the Sorith Confession's implications. Structured debate is the Council's way of letting everyone talk without letting anyone fight. Each species gets equal floor time. They speak in order of seniority. The oldest registered member goes first, which means the Orith 9 always speak first, and they always speak longest regardless of the time allocation. The Orith 9 delegate, a tall, gray carapaced individual named, according to my session roster, something that translates roughly as senior voice of the 9th iteration, took the floor and spoke for 22 minutes about the procedural correctness of Article 9, the historical precedent of voluntary confession as a stabilizing force in interspecies relations, and the importance of proportional response in cases involving pre-contact species. He said the word proportional 11 times. I counted. He did not say the word Earth once. He did not say the word human once. I wrote 11 proportionals. 0 humans. Then I drew a second rectangle. Smaller than the first. The Velmara spoke next. Softer in tone. More philosophical. They expressed what their delegate called measured concern about the Soritha's methodology, not the action itself, which they characterized as understandable given Sector 7's expansion pressures, but the absence of pre-survey registration. If the Sorith had flagged the system for observation before sending assessment vessels, the Velmara noted, the entire incident could have been avoided through standard protocol. That was when I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Something cooler. The feeling you get when you realize the room has decided on a framework and the framework does not include you as anything other than a data point. A data point with 17 titanium anchors in its leg and a daughter studying marine biology, but a data point nonetheless. The Thren Collective spokesperson, they operate as a group, 3 individuals who share speaking time in a rotation I have never fully understood, raised the question of whether the lost vessels might have been the result of environmental hazards mislabeled as hostile engagement. They cited 3 precedents from the outer sectors where similar losses had been attributed to spatial anomalies rather than native species action. The implication was clean. Pre-FTL species do not destroy 8 cloaked military-grade assessment vessels. Something else must have. I uncapped my pen. I wrote, they think it was the weather. The Sorith delegate asked for the floor again. The Grand Master granted it. The delegate pulled up the sensor logs from the incursion, formal records, date-stamped, authenticated through council channels, and began reading the sequence of events. The chamber got quieter with each line. Day 1, Fleet enters Sector 7 marginal zone. All cloaking systems nominal. Detection probability calculated at less than half of 1% by the Soritha's own models. Day 2, no contact. Day 3, the first vessel, designated Survey Lead 1, detects a broadband communication signal originating from the 3rd planet. Not a targeting signal. Not a military frequency. A civilian one. Fragmented, scattered across hundreds of subfrequencies simultaneously, carrying what the sensor logs described as enormous volume of unencrypted, cross-reference positional data. The delegate paused there. Our analysts, he said, were initially uncertain what they were observing. The signal architecture did not match any known communication model. It appeared to be a network. Self-organizing. Distributed across the species' entire population without a central control point. Within the data being transmitted was an accurate positional map of all 8 vessels. The chamber was completely still. How? The Velmara Grandmaster asked. The delegate pulled up one specific record from the log. A single report, filed by Survey Lead 1's communication analyst, timestamped 36 hours after the fleet's entry into the sector. A watercraft operator on the planet's northern ocean noticed anomalous displacement patterns in the water surface. He recorded his observations and broadcast them on the civilian network. The broadcast was received, cross-referenced, and expanded by other users across the planet within hours. By the 9th hour after the initial broadcast, the fleet's full trajectory had been mapped using nothing more advanced than the planet's existing observation infrastructure and the network they used to communicate with each other. Silence. A fishing boat, said the Thren Collective's first speaker. The translator struggled with the concept. It offered a small water surface vessel for harvesting ocean life. Yes, the delegate said. Found your cloaked fleet? Yes. The second speaker of the Thren Collective conferred with the third in a rapid, clicking exchange. By accident, the second speaker asked. The delegate looked at his records. The operator was 63 years old. He had worked on the ocean for 40 years. He noticed the water was wrong. His word was, the translator worked for a moment, off. He said the water looked off. I stopped writing. I was looking at the wall. The pale stone from the planet that no longer exists. I was thinking about a man named Michael Brandt, which is not thinking so much as a thing that happens to you when you are sitting in a hollowed moon listening to your species described like a footnote. Michael Brandt was 63. Bad knees. A boat his father left him. He went out on the North Atlantic on a cold morning in March and the water looked wrong. He did not know what he was looking at. He told everyone anyway. The Velmara delegate asked the Soreth to continue. The delegate continued. Day 4, Survey Lead 1 is destroyed. No conventional weapon signature in the logs. The vessel's final transmission records multiple small watercraft, fishing vessels, cargo ships, civilian boats, converging on its position simultaneously. The planet's orbital communication network was broadcasting in real time. Days 5 through 9, the remaining 7 vessels attempt repositioning. Each new position is identified within hours. The planet's civilian population was treating it, by the sensor log's best interpretation, as a collective problem to be solved. They were not operating under unified command, the Orith 9 delegate asked. No, the Soreth delegate said. There was no unified command. Each nation on the planet had its own government, its own military, its own response protocols. They were not coordinating through official channels. Then how? They were coordinating through each other, the delegate said. The network. Everyone talking to everyone at once. Our analysts estimated that by day 7, a significant portion of the planet's adult population was actively engaged in tracking the fleet. The Orith 9 delegate was quiet. That was unusual enough that I wrote it down. Day 11, the final vessel. The delegate closed the sensor log. We do not know the full accounting of what the planet lost during those 11 days, he said. Our perimeter defense systems were automated. They responded to any vessel that approached within a defined range. We were not, he stopped. Collected himself. We were not aware of how many civilians were approaching. The chamber held that. I held it. A sweet, familiar anger moved through me. The kind that does not heat you up but steadies you. Like a railing in the dark. I picked up my pen. I wrote one line across the middle of the fresh page. Then I tore it out very carefully, folded it once, and passed it to the Grandmaster's aide. The aide looked at it. Looked at me. Walked it forward. The Grandmaster read my note and set it aside without expression. I did not know if that was good. The floor was open for council response to the sensor log presentation, and 14 species had things to say about it, and I sat in the observer gallery with an empty notepad page and listened to all 14 of them be wrong in 14 distinct and specific ways. The careful talking went like this. The Velmara went first. Gentle, thorough, genuinely kind in the way that people who have never needed to be anything else can afford to be. They expressed sorrow for what the Soratha's automated systems had done to civilian approaching vessels. They said the word tragic 4 times. They proposed a formal apology be recorded in the Council registry. Recorded. In the registry. I drew a third rectangle. The Thren Collective revised their earlier position. The sensor logs, they acknowledged, did suggest active species engagement rather than environmental hazard. However, they maintained, the nature of that engagement pointed to what their analysis called a hive-adjacent behavioral model. The species, they theorized, functioned as an instinctive collective, no central command, no strategic thinking, just aggregated biological response, like the way certain ocean organisms cluster around a light source. Like organisms. I filled in the rectangle. The Orith 9 delegate, who had been quiet since his 22-minute opening, returned to the floor. He spoke carefully, the way you speak when you are reframing something that has unsettled you. He said the incident was an important reminder of why pre-contact protocol exists. He said the Soratha's failure to register the system had created a situation that, while regrettable, was ultimately the product of protocol violation rather than any inherent unpredictability on the part of the native species. The situation, he said, is unlikely to recur. The species is now in observed status. The variables have changed. He said variables. I put my pen down. I picked it up again. A smaller species, the Irith, I checked my roster, one of the newer members admitted about 80 years ago, asked what had happened after the 11 days. Had the planet attempted to communicate? Had they signaled for contact? The Sorith delegate checked his records. They attempted to signal on every frequency they could produce, he said. They broadcast in multiple languages. They also, he paused. They also fired several large rockets into orbit, carrying physical materials. Plates, engraved with mathematical sequences and biological diagrams. As a form of introduction. The chamber murmured. During an active incursion, the Irith asked. Yes. They were trying to make contact while simultaneously defending against the fleet. They were trying to do both, the delegate confirmed. We believe they considered them the same conversation. I looked at the wall again. My daughter's teacher, a woman named Grace Owen, 34 years old, second grade class at an international school in Osaka, spent 11 days in a basement reading picture books to 40 children. One of the books was about whales. My daughter came home knowing every species of whale on the planet, all the names, all the songs. She remembered the songs for years. The council's debate was entering its second hour. The frameworks being built around humanity were getting more elaborate and more wrong with every speaker. The hive model theory was gaining traction with the Thren Collective, who kept returning to the absence of central command as proof. The Velmara were constructing a sympathy narrative. The Orith 9 were, I noticed, not constructing anything. They were listening. The Orith 9 listening is never decorative. The Velmara delegate finally turned to face the observer gallery directly and said, "We believe the observer may have perspective on the civilian response coordination that would assist the Council's understanding. We defer to the Grandmaster's discretion on whether to invite comment." The Grandmaster picked up my folded note. He opened it. He read it. He read it again. He looked at me. I looked back. The observer's note, the Grandmaster said, submitted to the floor under Article 14, Observer Supplementary Communication, reads as follows. The chamber quieted. He read it aloud. We did not engage because we thought we would win. We engaged because the alternative was doing nothing. 11 seconds of silence. I counted. The Thren Collective's first speaker said, "We require clarification." The alternative was in fact doing nothing. Doing nothing was available. Doing nothing was, by any survivability analysis, superior. Why was it not considered? I was already standing. I do not know when I stood up. The protocol for observers is to remain seated unless invited to address the floor. The Grandmaster had not specifically invited me to address the floor. He had read my note. I was standing. He did not tell me to sit down. The trawler captain's name was Michael Brandt, I said. My voice was level. It is always level. He was 63 years old. He had bad knees and a boat he inherited from his father. He went out on the North Atlantic on a cold morning and the water looked wrong. The chamber was still. He did not know what was out there. He did not know the scale of it, what the ships were, what they meant. He knew the water looked wrong. He told every person he could reach. I paused. Not for effect. Because the next part takes a moment to say correctly. He was gone inside a week. The automated perimeter defense systems reached his vessel on day 4. Nothing from the floor. He knew the risk on day 1, I said. He posted his observations on day 1. He knew the water was wrong on day 1 and he told people. That is the note. That is what it means. The alternative was doing nothing, and for Michael Brandt, and for most of the people on that planet, doing nothing when something is wrong is not actually an alternative. It looks like one from the outside. It does not feel like one from the inside. I sat down. Nobody said anything for a long time. The Orith 9 delegate was looking at me with an expression I could not read. His species' facial structure does not map cleanly to human emotional recognition. I was not reading faces. I was watching posture, and his posture was the posture of a person recalculating. The Velmara Grandmaster said, carefully, the Council notes the observer's contribution and thanks her for the context. Then he said, we will recess for 30 minutes. In the corridor, the bioluminescence of the Velmara delegate caught the light. She approached me slowly. She said, what percentage of your species would respond as that man did? I thought about it. Most of them, I said. She was quiet. Most, she said. Most, I said. She turned that over for a long time. I waited. She said, that is either the most dangerous sentence I have heard in 40 years on this council, or the most important. I picked up my coffee cup. Still cold. I drank it. We get that a lot, I said. The recess lasted 50 minutes, not 30. I know because I sat on the bench outside the main chamber doors and watched the corridor's gentle amber lighting cycle twice. Delegates from 6 different species passed me. 3 of them looked at me directly. 2 of them looked away first. One, a young Irith, rust-colored, quick-moving, stopped and stared for 4 full seconds before a colleague pulled her onward. I ate a protein bar from my bag. It was 3 days past its best date. I ate it anyway. When the session resumed, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed. Not dramatically. The chamber is too old and too large for dramatic shifts. But the way 23 species settle into their seats tells you things. The Thren Collective, who usually arrange themselves in a loose triangle, were seated close together, conferring. The Velmara delegation had 3 additional members in seats that had been empty in the morning session, senior advisors, by their rank markings. The Orith 9 delegate had a new aide standing behind him, and that aide was holding a data reader and looking at me with professional attention. I noted all of it. Then I opened my notepad and did not look up for a while, because sometimes the best surveillance is the kind that does not look like surveillance. The Grand Master reconvened the session and opened the floor for continued response to the morning's discussion. What followed was 2 hours of the most careful talking I have ever heard in this chamber, and I have been in this chamber for 3 years, and I was a liaison officer for 22 before that, and I have heard careful talking in more rooms than I can name. The careful talking went like this. The Velmara presented a revised analysis of the sensor log data. They had used the recess to run the civilian coordination timeline through their own behavioral models. The result, their delegate said, was inconsistent with any known collective instinct model and required a new framework to describe. The Thren Collective's hive organism theory, the Velmara said respectfully, did not account for the speed and the diversity of the response. Organisms that cluster toward a light source do not simultaneously attempt diplomatic contact while coordinating physical defense and here the Velmara delegate paused, while sending their children underground to be kept safe with picture books. The delegate looked at me briefly when he said that. I did not react. The Thren Collective withdrew the hive organism model without much resistance. They replaced it with something they called distributed individual agency, which is a scientific way of saying they understood now that the people on the planet were people who made individual choices that happened to point in the same direction. They found this, their spokesperson said, computationally unusual. People usually disagree, the first speaker added. Yours did not disagree about this, the second said, gesturing toward me. They disagreed about everything else, I said. I was not supposed to speak without being recognized. The Grandmaster looked at me, and I sat back, and he chose not to make a point of it. He recognized me. I stood. The people on that planet, I said, disagree about almost everything. What to eat. Who to vote for. What the right way to live is. They have been arguing about those questions for as long as they have existed, and they will keep arguing. But there are a handful of things, a small number of things, where the disagreement stops. Or gets quiet enough to act through. Someone coming for them is one of those things, the Velmara Grandmaster said. Someone coming for their kids, I said. That is the one. The chamber sat with that. The Orith 9 delegate took the floor. He spoke for a long time. Not 22 minutes this time, closer to 40. And the 40 minutes were different from the morning's 22 in a way that I felt in my back teeth, which is where I feel things I do not want to show on my face. He talked about the Council's history. About how the organization had been built, over 3 centuries, on a foundation of mutual deterrence and proportional engagement. He talked about the species that had joined early and the species that had been brought in later, and the framework that had kept something like peace across a volume of space that, by any measure, should have been ungovernable. Then he said, every member species of this council was, at some point, an unknown quantity. We learned the nature of each species through interaction, through conflict, through negotiation. We developed models. Our models are the foundation of everything we do here. He paused. Our models, he said, do not currently account for this species. He looked at me. Not at the gallery. At me specifically. The sensor logs describe a population that was, by every metric, outmatched. No interstellar capability. No knowledge of what they were facing. No guarantee of survival. He paused again. They did not ask whether they could win, he said. Our models have no category for a species that does not ask that question. The room was very quiet. I looked at my notepad. I had drawn 4 rectangles over the course of the day, each one smaller than the last. I was not going to draw a 5th. I put the pen down. They do ask it, I said. The Grandmaster looked at me. I stayed seated this time. I want to be clear about that. They ask it. They argue about it. There are always people who say the odds are wrong and the fight is not worth having, and the smart choice is survival over principle. I picked the pen back up. Old habit. They just do not let that argument be the last word, I said. Why not? The Velmara Grandmaster asked, very quietly. I thought about Grace Owen and the picture books and the whale songs. I thought about my daughter's face at 19, more ocean than anything else, still carrying 48 hours in a basement as the thing that made the ocean make sense to her. Because they have kids, I said. And the kids are watching. Nobody laughed. Nobody was going to laugh. But there was a shift in the room, not a dramatic one, just the kind of thing that happens when something lands correctly. The Orith 9 delegate was still looking at me. Commander Ven, he said. Using my title. He had never used my title before. Yes, I said. In your assessment, and the Council invites your assessment formally, as permitted under Article 14, how should we expect your species to behave as a member of interstellar society? What should we prepare for? I looked at him for a long time. He was asking the real question. Finally. After a full day of the Council building frameworks and running models and categorizing humans as variables. He was asking a human what humans are. It was the most important question I had been asked in 3 years, and also the one I had the least diplomatic answer to. Prepare for a species that will show up when called, I said. Prepare for a species that will argue with you about everything and then show up anyway. Prepare for a species that does not have a clean separation between what it will protect and what it will risk. That is going to be complicated for you sometimes. It is going to look like irrationality. It is not. It is just a different calculation. What is the calculation? The Velmara asked. Whether they can look their kids in the eye afterward, I said. The Orith 9 delegate wrote something down. His aide handed him a new data reader. He looked at it briefly and set it aside. One more question, he said. The man. Brant. He had no military training. He was a fisherman, I said. And the others who converged on the vessels. The ones your record shows approaching in civilian watercraft during the engagement. Fishermen. Cargo operators. One retired harbor pilot. A marine biologist. A science teacher on a research vessel who was on her first posting out of university. Silence. None of them military, the Orith 9 delegate said. No. Then why? Not a question. A statement. But he was looking at me and the room was looking at me and I had put my pen down and I was going to have to answer it with my actual voice, not a note, not a rectangle, not a piece of paper folded once and handed to an aide. Because the water looked wrong, I said. And when the water looks wrong, you tell people, and you move toward it, not away from it. That is the calculation. You can call it irrational. My species has been calling it irrational among themselves for 1,000 years. They still do it. The Orith 9 delegate looked at the Velmara Grandmaster. The Grandmaster looked back. Something passed between them that I did not need to be able to translate. We will move to the status review, the Grandmaster said. Earth's observer status is due for its triennial evaluation. I sat back. I picked up my pen. I drew a fifth rectangle. I did not fill it in. The status review is the most routine item on the Council's agenda when it involves Earth. It had been routine twice before. The first time, Earth's non-voting observer status was confirmed and no changes were proposed. The second time, a minor amendment was added to allow observer submissions under Article 14, which is the only reason I had been able to pass the note, and before that the only reason I had been able to speak at all. 3 years of slow, careful, incremental movement. I expected tonight to be the third time it was routine. The Orith 9 delegate asked for the floor. I wrote down the time. He began speaking, and within the first 2 minutes I understood that this was not going to be routine, and I put my pen down slowly and carefully, the way you put something down when your hands are steadier than your chest. He said, the Orith 9 block proposes a formal motion for expedited elevation of Earth from observer status to provisional member status, effective at the close of this session. The chamber processed that. Then it moved. Not with objection, with second motions. The Velmara seconded before the Orith 9 delegate had finished his sentence. The Irith delegation seconded. The Sorith delegate, still quiet, still carrying the weight of the morning's confession, raised his hand and seconded. For more followed in the next 60 seconds. I was looking at my notepad. I had drawn a very small rectangle in the corner of the page. Smaller than all the others. I looked at it for a long time. Then I folded the page over so I could not see it. The debate was quick, by Council standards. 35 minutes. Most of the arguments in favor had been made, implicitly, over the course of the entire day's session. The arguments against were procedural rather than substantive, the standard waiting period, the standard assessment criteria, the question of whether the Sorith confession session was the appropriate forum for a status elevation. The Orith 9 delegate addressed each one patiently. His answers were not dramatic. They were the answers of someone who had made up his mind during the recess and was now walking everyone else to the same place with the minimum amount of noise. When the vote was called, it was 19-4 in favor. Provisional member status. Effective immediately. The Grandmaster asked if the Earth Observer wished to formally acknowledge the elevation on behalf of her world. I stood up. I had a prepared statement on my tablet. I had written it 2 years ago, theoretically, as an exercise, just in case, just to have something ready. I had updated it 6 months ago and then again last week, which I choose not to read too much into. I picked up the tablet. I read the first 2 sentences. I put it down. My name is Asha Ven, I said. I am from Chicago. That is a city on a continent on a planet that is 300 million miles from here, and I have been sitting in that chair for 3 years, and I have a daughter who is 19 years old and studying marine biology because she spent 11 days in a basement when she was 8 with a teacher who read her picture books about whales, and she has been trying to get back to that ocean ever since. The chamber was quiet. I will relay your decision to Earth, I said. They are going to have a lot of questions. They are going to argue about everything you offer them and agree with about half of it and push back hard on the other half, and some of that pushing back is going to be uncomfortable. They are going to want to understand the rules before they follow them, and they are going to ask why the rules are what they are, and if the answer is because we have always done it this way, that is not going to be enough for them. I want you to know that in advance. No one spoke. They are also going to show up when you need them to, I said. That part one can guarantee. The rest of it you will have to work out with them directly. I picked up the tablet. I put it in my bag. I sat down. The Grandmaster said, "How does Earth wish to be designated in the Council's formal roles?" I thought about it. Actually thought about it. Not the pause before a prepared answer. The real kind. I thought about Michael Brandt, 63, bad knees, inherited boat. I thought about Grace Owen reading whale names to frighten children in a basement. I thought about the science teacher on her first posting, fresh out of university, moving toward the wrong water. I thought about my own daughter at 8, sitting on the floor of that basement, not knowing what was happening and learning whale songs anyway. I thought about all of it. Human, I said. Just put human. We know what we are. Nobody in that chamber did. That was going to be fine. The session was adjourned. The amber arc on the far wall completed its final cycle. 23 species stood and began the organized shuffle of post-session movement, conversations resuming, data tablets exchanging, the low murmur of politics resuming its normal speed. I sat. I always sit last. The Velmara Grandmaster passed my gallery on his way out. He paused. He is old enough that his bioluminescence has started to fade at the edges, not gone, just softer. Like a light that has been left on for a very long time. That thing you said, he said. About looking their children in the eye. I waited. My species does not reproduce the way yours does, he said. We do not have the same investment architecture. The young are cared for collectively. I know, I said. I have been wondering, he said, whether that is why your species calculates differently. I thought about it. Probably part of it, I said. But fishermen without children did the same thing. The science teacher was 24. No kids. She moved toward it anyway. He considered that for a while. Then what is the full explanation, he asked. I looked at the ceiling. 40 meters of pale stone. Built to make things feel small. I do not think there is one, I said. That is probably the part that worries you most, and I understand that. I am not going to pretend it should not. He was quiet for a moment. It does concern me, he said. A species that acts beyond its survival calculation is unpredictable. Yes, I said. And yet you are here, he said. And the council voted 19-4. Yes, I said. Because, he said, slowly, working through it in real time, a species that acts beyond its survival calculation is also. He stopped. Yeah, I said. That too. He left. I sat alone in the grand chamber for a while. The lights had shifted to their post-session mode, lower, amber, the kind of light that is technically functional but feels like something older. The pale stone floor stretched out ahead of me, emptied of 23 species and their aids and their debates and their models and their calculations. It was very big and very quiet. It did not make me feel small. I reached into my bag and pulled out my notepad. I opened it to the last used page. 5 rectangles. 4 filled in. The 5th still open. I filled it in. Then I took out my phone, a thing that required its own special exemption in the council's electronic policy, a thing I had argued for in my first week and one, which had surprised the protocol office considerably, and called my daughter. She picked up on the second ring. Mom, she said. Not a question. Just the word, the way you say it when you have been waiting for a call and trying not to act like you have. Hey, I said. How did it go? I looked at the chamber ceiling. At the stone. At the space a hollowed moon makes when you gut it and fill it with ambition and history and careful, practiced power. We got voted in, I said. Silence on the line. Then a sound that is not quite a laugh and not quite a breath and not quite anything I can put a name to. The sound of someone in a marine biology lab 300 million miles away sitting down very carefully. Full member, she asked. Provisional, I said. For now. Mom. I know. Do they know what they just did? I picked up my pen. I looked at the 5 rectangles on the page. I thought about Michael Brandt. I thought about whale songs. I thought about water that looks wrong and the particular kind of person who moves toward it. Not yet, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Are you coming home? She asked. First shuttle in the morning, I said. I will be at the port, she said. You do not have to do that, I said. Mom, she said. I know, I said. I will see you in the morning. I hung up. I sat in the empty chamber for another few minutes. The amber light. The pale stone. The ceiling built to make things feel small. I stood up. I put my notepad in my bag. I put my pen in my coat pocket. I picked up my coffee cup, cold, the same cup from the morning, because I had carried it all day out of habit and never found a place to put it down. I took the last sip. It was bad. It is always bad. I walked to the door. I did not look back at the chamber. I did not need to. I had the whole thing memorized, and not because it was impressive, but because knowing a room, really knowing it, every corner, every angle, every silence it holds, is how you learn to work inside it. The corridor was empty. The amber lighting was lower here, and outside the viewport at the far end, 300 million miles of space sat dark and quiet and full of species that were going to be surprised. I walked toward the shuttle bay. My left leg ached the way it always aches. 17 titanium anchors. I knew every one of them. The shuttle bay doors opened ahead of me. I went through.